So now we're in chapter 47, and we'll get a little more information here. It's talking about the healing waters and the trees. So then he brought me back to the door of the temple. So he being the angel again, once again transporting Ezekiel from up above when we were talking about the kitchens where they were boiling the meat. That's the outer court area where the Levite priest. Now he's bringing him back into the inner court to the door of the temple itself. And there was water flowing from under the threshold of the temple toward the east. For the front of the temple faced the east, and the water was flowing from under the right side of the temple, south of the altar. So it might be easier if you look in your packet and you see this page here that I have for you. And it just is going to give you a little line example of how the water is going to flow. The top shows you where it starts at the temple door, where it comes out, and then the second one down below it is just simply showing where it leaves that area and comes out and empties itself into the Dead Sea. So we're going to see more about that. So this is just a rendering of how that, what he's telling us here in chapter 47, how that river is actually going to flow. It says, he brought me, but first the important part of verse 1 is, where does it begin? The door of the temple, and leaving out through the east gate, that important east gate. Verse 2, he brought me out by the way of the north gate. So the angel is now bringing Ezekiel out by the way of the north gate. And he led me around on the outside to the outer gateway that faces east. And there was water running out on the right side. It kind of makes me think of if you had a drone and you could just, pan out and go around and see. That's kind of what this angel is doing with Ezekiel. He's showing him sort of an all-encompassing view of the water leaving the area. If you were standing right there and you were watching it come out of the temple area and coming out, you're not going to see sort of the whole thing as it flows out through the temple area. Verse 3, and when the man went out to the east with the line in his hand, so the man is who? The angel, called a man here, with a line in his hand, he measured 1,000 cubits, and he brought me through the waters, and the water came up to my ankles. There's an older, this is an old rendition, but I thought it was so cool, of an artist's rendering down here at the bottom in your page, and it just kind of shows the story of Ezekiel. This top one is, of course, what we're going to be looking at, but it sort of just shows how this is pictured with Ezekiel down here. So he brings him through the river, and at the very beginning of the river, it's going to only come up to where?
His ankles.
To his ankles. So it's just a small little dribble of water, creek you're calling it, a little small amount of water, just to the ankles. And then in verse 4, he measures another 1,000, and he brought him through the waters, and now the water is going to be increasing. It's coming up to his knees. So it's a much deeper water. Again, he measures, so they're just kind of following the flow of the river, aren't they? As this river is increasing. And he says, and he measured another 1,000, and it came up to his waist. So now Ezekiel is half into if he's a 5'10" man, he's half into I don't know if he is, but I'm just saying an average size. He's half into the water at this point. So it's getting deeper as it flows further on into, as we can see, it's going to empty out into the sea. Finally, it says, I couldn't cross after another 1,000 because the water was deep water. One must swim a river that could not be crossed. And so it was much deeper than Ezekiel was tall. As it got out, it just continued to increase in the depth of it. Verse 6, and he said to me, Son of man. How many times in our book have we heard Ezekiel called this? I can tell you this is number 92. This is the 92nd time that Ezekiel is called Son of Man in this book. And it's the last time that he's going to be called Son of Man. Have you seen this? And he brought me returned me to the bank of the river. So now not only is Ezekiel getting the dimensions of the water and getting this kind of panoramic view of how it's just going to increase as it flows out, but now he's going to bring him back and he's going to say, hey, have you seen this? And when I returned, there along the bank of the river were very many trees on one side and the other. So this is the river is now, Ezekiel is seeing that the river is lined with trees. And he said to me, this water flows toward the eastern region. It goes down into the valley. So what he's talking about here is that Jordan Valley area that it's flowing down into. Again, you can look at your little map and you can see that's the exact direction that this is all flowing from the temple down towards that. It's all heading into that area and enters into the sea. So we can see here in our picture, in our diagram, that it's going to enter into what we today call the Dead Sea. When it reaches the sea, the waters are healed. Okay, so that's really interesting. If you look at your next page in your packet, you can see nothing in color transports as nicely in black and white, but you can kind of get an idea of this is a current modern day picture of the Dead Sea. It just shows you that this is all salt remnants and stuff there, that and then the stagnant, heavy waters out here are surrounding it. I've given you a lot of information here that you can look at. It's 42 miles long and 11 miles wide. It is one of the tributaries for the Jordan River. It's 8.6 times saltier than the ocean. This salinity makes for a harsh environment in which animals cannot flourish. That's why it's called the Dead Sea, because everything goes in it dies. So the high salinity prevents microscopic aquatic organisms such as fish and aquatic plants from living in it. That's important because today we know, how many of you have floated in the Dead Sea? See, you did?
No, I didn't.
You didn't go float? Oh, can't believe it. Did you float? Oh. So it's so salty that when you go into it, you can't sink in it. You're so buoyant that you can't. You can lay on your back and read a newspaper and you look like an otter. That's what you look like, because you just stay up. You can't drown in the Dead Sea unless someone holds you down in it. And so it's 1,237 feet deep. So you can read about the other details in our little information here, but it just sort of gives you an idea of what the Dead Sea looks like today.
And it's
now,
receding.
It's what?
It's receding.
It's receding and more of the salt area.
But
now, out of the
sinkholes are forming that are freshwater next to it, which will mean it can go wider very easily and all. They're all fenced off because it's so dangerous. All of a sudden,
they're just
sinkhole drops.
Yeah. And they do a lot of excavating out of the Dead Sea because there is one crop that's very important for them there, and that is the minerals that come out of here. Salt being one of them. There are other minerals, and the ahava, you've heard of ahava, skin care and skin creams and stuff. Sometimes you can even get them. I found them at TJ Maxx a few times where you can get it. But it's made with the minerals, and they're not the only one. There are a couple of others too. It's very expensive to purchase, and so the people who make their living out of the Dead Sea make a very lucrative living. Now it's interesting today too because the Dead Sea, the border is right in the middle. Half of it belongs to Jordan and half of it belongs to Israel. And the reason why it is important is because all of them are making money off of the minerals of the Dead Sea. But that is the only thing that you can really do out of there because the water doesn't provide for anything else. So just kind of an interesting note that there is something that they can earn from it.
Well, it says the waters are healed. I mean, that's kind of an odd term.
Well, they're dead.
Well,
Right now
They
they're
won't
dead.
well, okay. Healed to me just means something could live, but it isn't because the fish die and
Right
For now.
for now.
For now, it's dead. Nothing can live in it, it's dead. What he's telling us here is that a healing will occur and the water will become alive. When in the millennial kingdom. Let me finish. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Yeah.
Verse 9. Okay, well, look back up at verse 8. It says, when it reaches the sea, which is this Dead Sea, and you can see that on your other picture that I showed you, this last one. When it finally flows down from the temple, and it reaches down here and empties into the sea, look at verse 8, its waters are healed. It's not talking about the river water, that's the healing waters. The waters of the Dead Sea are healed. So that means that that which was dead will become alive. And it shall be that every living thing that moves, wherever the rivers go, will live. So all along from the time it leaves the temple until the time it empties into the Dead Sea, any place where it goes, it's going to bring abundant life back into it. There will be a very great multitude of fish because these waters from the temple, go there, for they will be healed, and everything will live wherever the river goes. So no matter what it touches or where it goes, it's going to bring an abundance of life. And then as it empties into that salt water that we looked at just now, that's just void of anything but minerals, when it empties into that, those waters are all going to be healed. 10, it shall be that fishermen will stand by it from En-gedi to En-eglam. There will be places for spreading their nets. Well, let me tell you this. You can't go out and spread a net in the Dead Sea. First of all, it's just going to float on the top. Second of all, there's nothing in there. You might be able to get a tourist who's floating in the water, but that's really the only thing that you're going to be able. I have to tell a little funny story. Sorry, Bonnie. I have to tell a funny story on Bonnie when we were in the Dead Sea and she was floating on her back and she got to laughing. She could not stand up. If you're not really working, and so she kept trying and kept trying and kept trying, but you're so buoyant, and she was giggling to where she didn't have any strength in her that she could not stand up. And it took like 5 attempts pulling her up. But it just goes to show you before she could actually stand on her 2 feet. But it's because she was laughing. And it just goes to show you how buoyant that is, that it's really, really difficult to navigate through there. So the fishermen are actually going to be able to stand on the banks of the Dead Sea during the millennial kingdom, throw their nets out, and the fish will be of the same kind as the fish of the Great Sea, exceedingly many. So the Great Sea in Scripture is always talking about the Mediterranean Sea, which you know borders Israel on the other side. And so the Mediterranean Sea today is where Israel gets much of the world, especially the Middle East, gets all of their fresh fish out of there. It's a very busy, important sea full of wildlife and fish. And so what it's saying is that same amount of abundance is going to be now in the Dead Sea. So they'll have 2 areas from where they can get all the food that they are going to need during this time. So it's verse 11 has just one stipulation. It says, but its swamps and marshes will not be healed. They will be given over to salt. So there's 2 thoughts behind why the marshes and swamps are not healed. There's two lines of thinking that I've been able to get a hold of. One of them is that many of those marshy areas are up next to where Edom is. And so we do know that Edom is going to be a place of perpetual destruction, even during the millennial kingdom. It's not going to be healed during that time. And so perhaps those are areas that are near that. The other line of thinking is salt is a necessary
we still need
thing.
ahava.
We still need the things that come from the salt. We need salt itself, and the minerals could be useful. And so it may be that these marshes and swamps are actually a lucrative production for items that will be necessary during this time. And if all the salty area leaves, then there's nothing there to provide what you're going to need. And salt, of course, is a very important thing that people are always going to need. And so those are the main two lines of thinking that people think about. Either it's from the Edom area where destruction is going to remain even during the millennial kingdom, or that salt is just necessary and it's a blessing to have an area where that's provided for them. Verse 12, along the bank of the river on this side and that, there's going to grow all kinds of trees used for food. Their leaves will not wither, their fruit will not fail. They will bear fruit every month because, underline this, or at least remember it, their water flows from the sanctuary. It comes from God. It comes from God. And so all of you gardeners out there, you probably can even picture this better than me. The leaves are never going to wither on these trees. Every month they're going to be abundant, different fruits. It's going to be all kinds of fruits that come, and every month there's going to be a production of fruit, so much so that evidently it'll be shared amongst the people. There'll be ample supply of the fruits that they need. Not only is the fruit going to be eaten and provide for them every month, but their leaves are going to be used for medicinal purposes. We only have an inkling of an understanding of how God has provided medicinal use out of nature. One of the things that they say, I've often heard people say that one of the saddest things that's happening about our rainforest is being destroyed so much, just in the last 50 years, so much of the rainforest has been destroyed, is that they say that there are likely so many cures for horrible illnesses out amongst those plants that we just don't have the ability to really understand. And so with the destruction of the rainforest, it's possible that many of those plants are going to disappear to where we can't use them. But we do know that God provided for those, and that people for centuries used those medicinal things very positively. For all kinds of things, from minor headaches and cramps to horrible illnesses that were life-threatening, and God provided for those. So it appears that in the millennial kingdom, if there will be some times when medicine is going to need to be used. That comes as a surprise to some people. They think, well, they'll never get sick, and everyone's in perfect health and all of that. But it appears that there will be human illnesses there, but that these leaves on these plants is going to provide medicinal uses along with the fruit of the trees. And so God has made provision here for every need of the people with these healing waters. And the important part of this is, how is all of this done? Of course it's done in a supernatural way, but how? Because it flows from where? The throne of God. From where Jesus Christ himself is sitting and ruling and reign, these healing waters. It's often called the river of healing waters. There's some old gospel songs that use this theme, and oftentimes people talk about it. From the throne of God flows the river of healing waters that brings healing, life, and abundance to his people everywhere.
And he said, I am the living water.
He does say, I am the living water, and here we see it coming from that very throne. So just another example of God's provision for his people. Okay, we're done, Fancy. We can turn that off. Question? Let me see here. Hang on.